lot. You never know. These guys tend to play some fast games from time to time, but let's check them out. Spawning in the upper right-hand corner of Royal Blood, we have the Shopify Rebellion's Terran, ByuN. One of the all-time fan favorites, one of my favorite players. Just an all-around good person. Very entertaining player as well. His opponent in the lower left-hand corner, one of the strongest Canadians we have, one of the strongest player from the Americas region that's left in this bracket right now. Can he keep it going for the Americas in this cup? Or will be another Canadian knocked to the side? It is Basilisk Gaming's Trigger. Now, I think these games might go a little bit longer, say, than that last PvP we just watched. That was a pretty quick one. But I don't know that they're going to go super long between these two. ByuN tends to be very aggressive. Very aggressive. And honestly, a lot of PvT these days is still 4-gate blink and things of that nature. Well, we have no proxies, so we at least have, I don't know, a minute or two, you know? We got some time before anything too spicy happens. Marine first here out of ByuN. No Reaper. Interesting choice. Straight into the reactor and a command center. So ByuN feeling like he doesn't have to do too much, put too much pressure on him. Trigger's going to send an Adept across the map and put some pressure of his own on. Very common thing to do. We've seen Max Packs have great success with his first couple of Adepts on the other side of the map. It could be something very, very difficult for the Terran to deal with. ByuN, though, he's going for 3 racks. So we're going to have a lot of Marine, maybe even some Marauder pressure across the map in a couple minutes here from ByuN. Although I will say I've seen more... sorry, I was going to do a bet for this one. I will do a bet for this one. I've seen more of 3 racks is just kind of chilling at home and going into like a follow-up, like a follow-up push than anything else. Trying to finish the thought I had before I realized I didn't ever do a prediction. Got to make sure you guys can bet your channel points. Otherwise, what else are we doing here? Nice micro here. Trigger just trying to poke and prod. Be able to get that SCV right before, or right as that bunker finishes, I should say. But yeah, we could see ByuN move out with this. We could also see him just chill. You know, get into medevacs, get a couple of more barracks down even. And then go for a big follow-up push. I think a lot of Terrans are taking that route. Just depends on what he sees from his opponent. If Trigger gets maybe a little bit too greedy back at home, doesn't build enough stuff, ByuN might feel like he can pull the trigger. Ha! Pun definitely intended. Actually, I didn't intend that one, but I will intend it next time I use it, probably by the end of this game. Let's be real. Trigger getting into a robo now after he's got blink going on. He's got a 3rd base on the way. Yeah, ByuN does have a lot of stuff. He's got a few Marauders with this. Stim and combat shields about 2/3 of the way done. Looks like he might want to head across. The Adepts are going to spot, or the single Adept, I should say, is going to spot that. That'll be the last thing that Adept does. Just an observer that got croned out of that robo. Trigger doesn't have a lot of stuff out at all. In fact, he's at 11 Army Splice, starts up an Immortal. I'm actually a little bit worried for Trigger here. Blink isn't done yet either, but it is going to finish up just in time for him to try to pick off a couple of these units. That combat shield's, though, really helping these Marines out. I think it takes 1 more Stalker hit to kill the Marines. Yeah, it does. But he does a lot of damage to these units before they get here. Shield Battery going to help out for a hot second before it gets blasted down. A couple of Zealots warping into. Stalker's trying to blink backwards. The Immortal is nearly done. ByuN isn't going to win the game with this, but this is certainly very, very nice. A few more Marines show up, though. The Marauder going to go down. A couple Stalkers warp in. This will finally get cleaned up. But 3 probes going down. ByuN, though, doesn't have a third base behind this. He's just getting into his starport. So while he kills a few probes, he resets Trigger's army. All in all, not that crazy of a trade here. It's 400 resources. With a third base, I think Trigger should be able to make that back up fairly quickly. He's got a slight income lead. Until this third base goes down, Trigger should have an income lead, even with mules and relatively even worker count. ByuN's oversaturated, so yeah, he's got a bit of a lead right now. I guess the mules really do help out. But Trigger should be able to get a decent army up. He's got that Robo Bay on the way. He's got Charge on the way and a Forge. But ByuN has no chill. That's what ByuN has in his corner. And he's going to stem right on in. Trigger really doesn't have much here. In fact, he's got 2 Stalkers across the map. He's trying to warp units in, but oh man, he's just got nothing here. He's got to pull the probes away. Oh my god, he traps his own probes with the force fields. Well, that first push didn't kill Trigger, but I gotta tell you, this one kind of did. Trigger losing 20 probes. He had a nice worker lead before this, and now that is not only completely gone, but it's getting worse by the second here as ByuN is just continuing to put this pressure on. Stimming in, getting a few more units, forcing a few more warp-ins down on that low ground. I mean, Trigger economically isn't in the worst position. He's chronoing probes right back out. Should be able to get that saturation back up in a couple minutes. But now ByuN's got a third base landing, and he's still up in workers. Trigger is getting into Colossi, so his army is getting stronger, even if the number is still lower than ByuN's. It's actually a pretty decent number now. In both the last attacks, it was like 10, 15 army supply down. It was at like half the army supply of ByuN, so now it's a little bit better. Colossus and Immortal are going to be doing a lot of work here. Those are some much better force fields. ByuN forced to lift up and get out of there, but only gets out of there with a couple of units. Trigger pulls back. He's got to be okay with that fight. But Trigger's definitely going to want a 4th base. I'm sure he wanted it before now, but he's just desperately trying to get some units out. ByuN getting into siege tanks now and Vikings. Not going for those ghosts. I've seen a lot of Terran players go straight to ghosts. But ByuN, he's sticking with the tanks and the Vikings. He wants more damage dealing units, and less spellcasters. Zealot setting up for a run-by. We saw earlier today the run-bys work very, very well for max packs against both Spirit and Clem. We'll see if the same can be said here for Trigger's run-bys. Big part of those run-bys that max packs was doing is it would be a few Zealots every now and then. Well, not even every now and then, like almost consistently into the 3rd and 4th bases. And eventually it was able to find damage. Here, Trigger doesn't necessarily have the economy to constantly run in and out of bases with the Zealots, but this is kind of nice. Keeps them alive. Does lose the Observer, but keeps the Zealous up. There's that 4th base on the way for Trigger. ByuN definitely still ahead by quite a bit here, but it's not over. Trigger's not dead. The biggest thing, I think, is ByuN's working on +2 and +1. He's just ahead in the upgrades by quite a lot. He's actually got +1 on the way for the tanks as well. And we've got an engagement showing up here. Tanks on the front door of Trigger. Trigger needs to be really careful. I wouldn't hate to see some of the Zealots split off for a potential flank if ByuN tries to dive in on top of this. We'll see. ByuN not putting too much pressure on Trigger since the 4th base is not there. Trigger's he's gonna pull the trigger though. He's gonna go for it and try to take these siege tanks down. Ooh, targeting down some Vikings, but the Colossi seem to be going down anyways. The tanks all fall, but the Zealots are all gone. Only one Colossus left. The Immortals doing what they can, but they're going to get taken down. And with that last Robo unit, GG gets called. Trigger tried to break the position, and it just didn't quite work. ByuN holding on there, using that advantage from the early game that he got for himself to get the bigger army. Trigger couldn't break it. Trigger's PvT has been amazing lately. I think the amount of damage he took, but then was able to like still play a solid game, really speaks to the level of Trigger's PvT. Like, I don't know, man. He took a lot of damage to that second stim bio attack, and still like really made a game out of it. I really feel like if that push at the end there had been handled a little bit differently by Trigger, he might have been able to stick in the game even longer and really make a game out of it. But we're gonna hop into game 3 here. Game 3? Game 2, I can count. And see, well, I guess we'll just see what happens. Spawning in the lower right-hand corner of Gressvon. For the Shopify Rebellion, we have the blue Terran player, ByuN. His opponent in the upper left in the red for Basilisk Gaming. It's Trigger. But yeah, that was a rough opening there for Trigger. Like I was talking about the 3 racks, ByuN was able to kind of make the decision, like, do I feel like I can get damage done if I move out, or am I going to chill with it? In that game, he felt like he could get damage done, and he absolutely could. Trigger just playing kind of fast and loose, didn't have a lot of units, and was ultimately punished for it. See if ByuN goes for something similar this game. I have a feeling it's going to be a slightly different opener from ByuN. I don't expect him to go 3 racks 2 games in a row, but you never know. Trigger, though, I wouldn't be too surprised to see him go from Blink into Colossi once again. But, yeah, he's going to have to keep an eye on what's going on ByuN's side of the map. It is a Reaper opening this time, so that leads me to believe it's going to be something different out of ByuN. Maybe a factory follow-up. Yeah, poor probe. Doesn't make it away. Still not seeing a factory, though, so you know what? Maybe it is going to be... Oh, it's going to be a 3rd command center. Okay. Quick 3cc here from ByuN. And this is very interesting. I like the way this works in a best of 3 sense. Stalker a little late here for Trigger, too. He's going to lose a probe because of it. ByuN, I don't know if you guys know, pretty good at Reaper Micro. He's going to be able to get the full scout. He will lose that Reaper, but gets a probe kill, gets the scout on the Twilight Council. Very nice. But yeah, the way ByuN opened up in the last game with a very aggressive build, the 3 racks, and, I mean, basically just got the kill because of it. Now following it up with a quick 3cc. It looks like Trigger was scouting something over here, but he's not going to get a scout on that 3rd command center unless he goes for a Stargate opener or something, which he did not. So now Trigger playing a little bit in the dark. I assume that was an Adept that went in. Looks like it got an SCV kill. Better than nothing. It is going to be essentially a 3 racks follow-up here. But this is partially because ByuN was very greedy with the CC. So now he's got to get into a lot of units to defend against anything Trigger might be throwing at him. Trigger has a gateway finishing up and a robo finishing up, but it looks like it is just going to be a 2-gate blink robo expand. This is a very standard macro build to do in this matchup. It's, I'm pretty sure it's just what Trigger did last game. Nexus goes down. It is important Trigger takes that quick third Nexus this game because he's going to be up against quick third CC. But ByuN, he's hoping that this quick third CC kind of keeps him relatively even economically with the Protoss. So there's two ways to go about that. I've talked about it a little before. Generally speaking, the Protoss is going to pull ahead economically. If everybody just chills and just macros, Protoss will be ahead economically. It's just how it works. Chrono boost. They take the bases quicker. It's just very likely how it goes. So the Terran usually tries to deal with this by harassing the mineral line. That's why we see Widowmine drops. We used to see Hellions a lot, Liberators, Banshees, etc. They could try to go for a big attack, like 3 racks like we saw last game. And instead of necessarily doing economic damage, although that build is kind of designed to kill third bases if the Protoss is really not paying attention, but can also just reset armies, could get some probe kills. We saw a little bit of both of that last game from ByuN. Or, another option, you just go for an even greedier opening. In this case, ByuN's chosen that one. Try to keep up economically by going for a very quick third base. Now, Trigger knows that third base is there. He also knows that his army's moving out, and with Blink Stalkers, he can pick this apart. Combat Shield's not quite done yet. Neither is Stim. That's going to make it a lot easier for these Stalkers to micro against this, get a couple of unit kills, and with no medevacs, all this damage is permanent too, so even if the Stalkers don't get the kill, little bits of damage here and there is still very nice over the course of this entire arc. As long as Trigger's fully paying attention, he shouldn't lose too much here. He's going to turn on the old overcharge on the shield battery. Oh, but that shield battery is going to get targeted down. This is a bit of a problem for Trigger, but he's got another shield battery. This is looking a lot better for him than last game. Of course, this attack hits a little bit later than it did in the last game, thanks to that third CC going down. ByuN's still trying to find some damage, but does get shoved away, and overall, better trade for Trigger. Now, in last game, Trigger held on pretty decently, lost some units, but it was really the follow-up that did the damage to him. So Trigger's going to have to be paying attention and make sure that follow-up doesn't do the same kind of damage, assuming ByuN goes for it. In this game, though, the follow-up isn't just more units running around the side of the map. With these 2 medevacs coming out, it could very well be a drop. Trigger has an observer right here spotting this, so he might be able to spot the pickup of these units. I don't think ByuN's realized this observer's here just yet.
SCV ready.
Oop, as I say that, looked like he was about to scan. No luck, though. That being said, I don't know why I say that all the time. I gotta stop. There's a Colossus out for Trigger. He's got a second one on the way. Thermal Lance is nearly done, but not quite there. Same for +1. ByuN's +1 is finished, but he's going to scan and see there's a bunch of stuff at this base. It's probably not the way to go. Try to rotate around the side. Ooh, Stalkers might get a little bit caught here. Going to have to blink away from their safety of this base. A bunch more Stalkers warping in. Is Charge on the way? No, Charge is already finished up. +1 armor started up here for Trigger. So as the game goes longer, Trigger's going to be able to get a bit of an upgrade lead. Since the second eBay and Armory is just now going down for ByuN, he's not going to be able to start 2-2 up for a while. As Trigger finishes up that +1, he hits at a beautiful timing right there. Really paying attention to where his upgrades are, knowing that he can take the fight a lot better once those upgrades are finished up. Shoves ByuN away, keeps his 4th base safe. As that finishes, the worker count's like dead even though. ByuN's actually been ahead in workers for most of this game, and as such has had a nice economic lead. He has been mining on less bases, so having more bases is always going to be better, but still seems to be working out very nice for ByuN. It's a very even game between these two. So far, Trigger holding under this pressure very, very nicely. We see the army supplies in favor of ByuN. I bring this up a lot. It's really important, though. that army supply counts these units that are in production. So the Terran often is fighting with a lot less units than they actually have in terms of the army supply. Not just do they have maybe some rallied units back at home, but any units in production, I mean, they're not in the fight, right? So usually the Protoss has maybe 1 or 2 robos spinning, and that's about it in terms of what's in production. The rest of what they're fighting with is reflected in the army supply. So we should see ByuN have a slight lead here in the army supply until they max out. But the fights themselves will be among pretty much dead even supplies. It's not the most important thing in the world, but it's good to remember when you're looking at the supplies, like, oh man, ByuN's 20 army supply ahead. Well, like it doesn't really matter, you know? It doesn't really actually make a difference unless you're maxed and still 20 army supply ahead. Or if you have 20 army supply and your opponent has 0, then it matters quite a bit. Trigger, though, as I'm talking about this, actually takes the army supply lead. While ByuN is focused on transitioning into Ghosts, putting up new CCs. Trigger is about to finish his +2 attack. Going to be up and upgrade and is feeling good about this fight. Actually, right before it even happens, some EMPs do go down. The Zealot's going to pull back for now and get inside this Guardian Shield. But ByuN gets caught with his pants down. A few tanks getting picked off as well. And Trigger says, okay, that fight went really well. I'm diving in. There is a big triple drop in the back of Trigger's base. Oh, but Disruptor's popping out at a beautiful space. And the Natural going to go down. Disruptor Nova not getting a great connection, actually killing a lot of probes, it looks like. EMP is peppering this army all over the place, but it's still not quite enough. The Ghost Academy falls. I don't know if Trigger wants to keep pushing this issue, though, but it looks like he is going to. He's got 4 Immortals with this, really chunking through those Marauders. Oh, man, Trigger is winning this fight handily, but this base is still destroyed. The Robos are depowered before either of those 2 units pop out. A few Stalkers and Zealots warped in back at home, going to try to hold on here, but they're not even killing a single unit thanks to this healing from the Medivacs. SCV's being pulled off the line on the other side of the map. This game is getting really scrappy. Big base trade energy going on here, and it looks like as the Colossi go down, ByuN's going to hold on this side of the map, and you know who's not holding back at home is Trigger. And Trigger's down to 26 army supply. He's just got nothing here. And as these last few Stalkers and Zealots fall, I have a feeling we're going to see Trigger tap out. ByuN really trying to target down this forward. It's actually not researching anything. 2-2 is done for both players. I mean, I don't know, man. Trigger's economy is slightly better, but only ever so slightly. And I actually think with Mules, it's going to be very close to even here. He's going to be able to remake quite a bit of army. He's got these repowered, so he's got a couple of Disruptors popping out. Disruptors are very, very good. Oh, nice ball forward. The Observer gets scanned because he knows it's there. There is another Disruptor Nova. Out it comes. I'm going to have to pull back. Super Shield Battery turned on. That's going to really, really help, especially through these EMPs. I just don't think it's enough here from Trigger, though. ByuN stimming forward, crushing these Stalkers, crushing the Zealots. He's going to catch the Disruptors. And as the last of Trigger's army falls, this is feeling like the end of game number 2. Trigger putting up an excellent fight here, but in the crazy base trade, ByuN was able to take down the army. Trigger was not. And Trigger just running away. He's just recalling these probes. He's got another Colossus. It's just he's falling even further behind in the army supply. Now it's 31 to 88. You guys remember when I was like, well, a little army supply difference doesn't matter too much? A lot of army supply difference really does matter. And I think there's just going to be too much here for ByuN. The Marauders are too high in count for the Colossus to really work. GG gets called. And ByuN takes that 2-0 victory, knocking out one of the final players from the Americas in this bracket.